Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. You know, this has been one of the best springs that I can remember. Okay, we had a hot spell, which wasn't the best, but now the weather has been almost ideal. Much of the area had timely rains, good soil moisture. Now we've had some nice sunny days, and I got our vegetable garden almost all planted, except the melons. I got to put those in yet. But now I'm just relieved. It's such a good feeling to get the vegetables planted. And so how about you? How's everything going in your yard? We got
the annuals planted. I'm going to move a couple of things around, but we're doing pretty good. But I got to say, it's time to work on the lawn. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get into that, things are going well. I think, like I said, we've got our hanging baskets up. I'm still building a little fence to fence off our new vegetable area. So there's still projects in the works. But as far as like actually getting things on the ground, I think we're doing really pretty good.
You know, you're ahead of us on the flower planting. We haven't got our flowers done yet. We went for the edibles first, so we got those in. But now it's interesting. Today, as we're recording this, it's the 29th, okay? And, you know, the old-time experienced gardeners always said, you know, do your planting on Memorial Day for vegetables. And Memorial Day, before they made it a Monday holiday in 1968, Memorial Day was May 30th every year. So when the old timers talked about planting on Memorial Day, they were talking May 30th. You know, sometimes now Memorial Day can be kind of early. So anyway, we've got good time yet. So if anybody listening to this a few days after this, there's still plenty of time. We're going to get our flowers planted, I think, this weekend. Okay. We're going to get them in. We'll fertilize them well. And these nice, bright, sunny days, you know, these long days of summer, things grow well. So I'm excited. Knock on wood, I think this has the makings of a really good gardening season.
Well, I certainly hope so. And it's been fun to see how much things have already grown that we have planted.
Isn't it remarkable?
Yeah, even including, you know, some of the vegetables. And you know, we should say, for reference, Don has a yard that is, Don's, your gardening space is probably, I know this is not an exaggeration. I would say maybe 10 times bigger than mine.
Well,
so
well, you know, I don't golf. This is my
I'm just saying
hobby
that,
as well as a line of work.
That if we are indeed ahead of you as far as flower planting, it's only because we don't have as much to do. I think you've got more work on your end, and also you've had more time. We're still trying to figure out what we like. So,
well, that's true. Yes.
That's a fun thing to do.
You know, and mentioning how things are going, gosh, the grass is growing just beautifully. And of course, that's going to be the topic of our podcast today. But the grass is growing just beautifully. The moisture that was enjoyed widespread over the region, the cooler weather, you know, bright sunny days, cool nights, the grass is just thriving.
I've mowed once. How many times for you? I think we're
4.
I was going to, okay. I knew you were close to 5.
And maybe the 5th is coming up, I think, but it's just done so very, very well. And I fertilized. One reason why it's grown fairly rapidly is before we got this last couple-inch rain, I did get the fertilizer down. And we're going to talk about fertilizing, but I can tell because I ran out of fertilizer for a section in our backyard, and that section is noticeably not as green.
Okay.
It's lighter green, and it's not growing as rapidly. So I caused myself more work, but we'll talk about fertilizing.
Well, you have a question about lawns. You had someone wrote to you with a question about lawns.
Glenn wrote in and says, my backyard lawn is very lumpy, bumpy, and rough. The lawnmower bounces all over it when I mow it. Do you have some solution or suggestions to smooth out the lawn? I'd hate to tear the lawn up and resod it. It's probably 50 years old since the house was built. Some people say it's due to earthworms, but I don't believe it because earthworms are good, right? So thanks, Glenn, for writing in. And immediately comes to mind, if a lawn is noticeably bumpy underfoot, it's usually night crawlers.
Okay.
At our old place, we had night crawlers. And when you walked across the lawn, it was like walking across golf balls. It's like you could almost turn an ankle, and when you'd go to mow, I'm surprised a bolt was left intact that didn't shake loose. And it's like, well, can it really be that bad? And yes, it can. Now, night crawlers are a type of earthworm. And they do aerate the soil, as they go through, they loosen the soil, and they generally do good things in a lawn. Now, night crawlers and other earthworms are not native. So sometimes you read where the forests in Minnesota are having problems because the night crawlers, not being native, are causing some problems in forest soils. But now in our own lawns, there are no chemicals that are labeled for night crawler control because they're considered beneficial. And so there's no product you can control that you can add that's labeled for night crawler control. So that means we need to mitigate their effects. Power raking, which we're going to talk about today. Power raking, also known as dethatching, can smooth out the bumps so they'll be less noticeable. The other suggestion is when you do water your lawn, if you water your lawn, water less often but deeper. That will help the night crawlers go deeper into the soil after the moisture and making less bumps on the surface. If you water shallowly and frequently, the night crawlers are going to stay up near the surface where that moisture is, causing more bumps. So thanks, Glenn, and thanks everyone who writes in to our podcast.
Yeah, it's great. And this is a good leadway into our show today. So let's get started. Like, where do we start? Where do we start with caring for our lawn?
Well, starting caring for our lawn, most of us want our lawn to just look nice, be thick and full. We don't want bare spots. And we want it to be, we don't want it to be a lot of work. And so a lawn that can be less work, yet look really nice, and less inputs can be had, but the best, healthiest lawn does take time. Maybe it's doing the right things, and sometimes there's small things, but the right things for that lawn to make it healthy, and it's maybe going to take 3 years of doing these small things, and we're going to mention these small things. So a lawn doesn't have to be high input. We don't have to be putting on a lot of chemicals and stuff, but applying them at the right time. And it also doesn't take a lot of water. The things that we do can help conserve water. So the healthiest lawn isn't something we can do today that's going to make it look beautiful next week. I've really come to the conclusion on observing a lot of lawns and getting a lot of email questions over the last number of years that it's doing these small things that we're going to discuss, doing them continually. And over a course of years, gardening teaches us patience. And over the course of a few years, your lawn is going to become more self-sustaining, thicker, and healthier. So where do we start? Well, fertilizer. About Memorial Day here, or shortly after Memorial Day, good time to fertilize the lawn. And I mentioned that I can tell where I left off with the fertilizer before then the rain started, so I'm going to have to fertilize the rest of it. The reason for fertilizing in the spring, and Memorial Day, give or take, is considered the best time in May to fertilize. And you've got a leeway a little here or there. But what fertilizing does in the spring of the year, it gives the grass the nutrition. It's not just about making it greener, it does that, but also it gives it the nutrition to spread sideways. Our good lawn grass can fill itself in. And of course, the nutrition helps it produce good deep roots that's able to mine moisture from down below. And if you encourage the grass to become thicker, there will be less weeds. Weeds tend to come into the areas that are a little bare or sparse. And so you see, by fertilizing, we'll get a thicker lawn. We don't have to apply as much weed control product either. So, fertilizer does cause the grass to grow more. So, to grow faster.
Yep.
And so you probably end up mowing a little more often, but that's a trade-off. Right. In addition to that, it's getting thicker and more self-sustaining by giving it. So if we talk about fertilizer types, The synthetic granular type that you apply, that has good nutrition in it. It's interesting, though, too. And the reason that I wanted to get that fertilizer down before the rain, the granular types that are available to most of us homeowners that you put on with your fertilizer spreader need water to dissolve those granules, so that the roots can drink that solution up. So it needs to get down into the root system, which is why many of us try to beat a good rain with it. So there are the synthetic granular types. You could also use an organic type of fertilizer, things that come more from natural sources. The first one that comes to mind that you see at a lot of garden centers or hardware stores is the brand called Milorganite. And that is a product that I think we've discussed this in the past, comes from Milwaukee sewage. I mean,
right.
It's not a bad, icky type product. I mean, you wouldn't even know what the source is. I mean, it's gone through all this
been refined
safety.
And
And it's a natural type of fertilizer. It works great on the lawns. I've used it. Organic type fertilizers tend to be a little slower acting, but longer lasting. And a side benefit of the Milorganite, anybody that's trying to keep deer out of their lawn, that has been shown to have some deer repelling effects.
Really?
So you can use the label on Milorganite. You can use it on a lawn, around perennials and different things. So even try it as a deer repellent. So that's probably one of the most commonly sold organic type of products that you can use in your lawn spreader, fertilizer spreader, to put on. Well, what about, as long as we're talking fertilizer, what about the weed and feed type products? You see those. Now, most of our lawns are not a carpet of weeds. And so carpeting the entire lawn with a weed control product is oftentimes unnecessary. When you read the label on those weed and feed products, they do not do a good job of preventing weeds. They are meant to stick, the granules have to stick to an actively growing weed. And so many of our lawns have, a dandelion here, one over there, or one over the corner, And so instead of a weed and feed product, I like to just spot spray. In a minute, we'll talk about weed control in lawns. But weed and feed products are quite expensive. And I like just the fertilizer, using just the fertilizer, and then just targeting the weeds instead of carpeting the whole thing with a product that probably isn't needed. Another thing is, as long as we're talking fertilizer, when you go shopping for fertilizer, there's a big difference in prices. There are national name brands of fertilizer, and there are kind of generic types. Now, when you look at the three numbers on a fertilizer bag, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, the first number is nitrogen, and that's for good leafy green growth on anything. And lawns are mostly green leafy growth. And so that first number, the nitrogen, is what's going to be very high. So when you're comparing different prices of fertilizer, look at that first number. And of course, the higher the number, it's going to have more nitrogen, so it'll probably cost a little more. But also look at the label for micronutrients, things that plants use in smaller quantities, but they're still important. An important one to look for on lawns is iron. Okay. Some of the national name brands will have that iron included, and that really helps a lawn to be greener and more lush. Some of the national brands have maybe more science, more research into their product to make it more available. Some of the economy brands might not have as much science. I've also noticed that some of the national name brands are a finer, smaller granule. Some of the cheaper are a bigger granule. And so the smaller granules are going to dissolve easily, more quicker than some of the large. And so, I'm as economical as the next gardener. Okay. Notice I didn't say I'm cheap, but, I have an eye out for a bargain. But I've just, in using both products, a generic and a name brand, I've gone to the name brand, the national name brands, because I just feel it has had a more visible, noticeable effect on my lawn. So even though it cost me a little more, I'm going for the product that I feel maybe has a little more research and is doing a little better. But any fertilizer is going to be better than no fertilizer in getting our lawn to thicken up. And again, it's the thicker the lawn, the deeper the roots, you're going to have to put in less weed control, less water. And so the importance of fertilizing now on Memorial Day and again in Labor Day, we'll be talking about that too. Fall fertilizer is the second time, very important.
What do you recommend for spot spraying? And we don't do product recommendations on the show really, but what things should you look for? What elements, what chemicals should you look for in a spot sprayer?
Yeah, because when a person has weeds, and weeds are death taxes are certainties. We should have added weeds
certainly
in that as well. And so weeds and a lawn just seem to come along with it. So I mentioned spot spraying. So we look for a lawn weed product, lawn weed herbicide, weed killer. So a lawn weed, meaning it's going to kill the weeds without killing the lawn grass. Mm-hmm. So they are selective for just broadleaf things like dandelions, thistles, things like that. So one of the most common is 2,4-D. Excuse me. So one of the most common is 2,4-D. So instead of looking at the brand name, we can look at the active ingredient, which is on fine print down on the label. So there will be different brand names. It may be Ortho, maybe High Yield, maybe the Bonide line of products. Those are all commonly found at garden centers. And so each of those has their own kind of brand name, but the active ingredients are going to be similar. So 2,4-D is a long-time broadleaf weed killer. Works great on dandelions, things such as that. Also, another one that you will find listed on the active ingredient is triclopyr, TRICLOPYR, triclopyr. For hard-to-kill weeds, such as creeping Charlie in the lawn, creeping bellflower, thistles, triclopyr has a little more teeth to it for hard to kill. So look for one with that. Sometimes you'll see products with dicamba in them, which is quite effective at weed control. Dicamba, person has to use with caution because dicamba can easily drift to other things that we don't want to drift to, trees, shrubs, your vegetables, your flowers. And so dicamba needs to be used with caution. Also, dicamba can move down through the soil. So over applying dicamba can mean it would go down into the root system of your trees, which we don't want. So again, spot spraying with these products instead of blanketing the entire lawn with them is a safer solution. So those would be probably the most commonly encountered active ingredients for lawn weed control. Now, when we talk about lawn weeds, what if you've got a wide-bladed weedy grass in there? You've got your nice Kentucky bluegrass and fescues, and they've all got that kind of a nice, somewhat fine blade. And then when you look at your lawn, you've got these wide-bladed grasses that are kind of junking up the lawn. Okay, so quackgrass is one of those. And quackgrass, you can kind of tell quackgrass by just digging a little of it, and it's got these underground rhizomes that are white or tannish, and that is the means by which it travels through your lawn. And if it's in round clumps, kind of a noticeable round clump instead of spreading and infiltrating like quackgrass, it's probably tall fescue. Another one that a person encounters is crabgrass. Crabgrass has to germinate from its own seed. It's not a perennial like tall fescue and quackgrass are winter hardy perennials. Crabgrass has to germinate from its own seed that was deposited last year. And so crabgrass is always slow to the party. It's probably just now germinating.
Okay.
And so that appears later. So if right now, as we speak, you've got these wide-bladed junky grasses, our lawn, especially the boulevard, has quackgrass in it. So that's already now actively green and growing. Unfortunately, For tall fescue and quackgrass, there are no selective products we can apply that will selectively take out those weedy grasses from your good grass. I'm sure the chemical companies would be working on it. They'd make a bundle.
Right.
And if I could just get that quackgrass out and keep the good stuff. But, that's not been created yet. So that means that if we want to get quackgrass or tall fescue out of our lawn, tall fescue is easier. It's in a clump. You can just dig out that clump, reseed. Quackgrass infiltrates. And so, about the only way is to spot spray with something that's going to kill everything, like glyphosate. That's the ingredient in original Roundup and some other brand names. That will kill both the good grass and the quackgrass, and then you need to reseed. Quackgrass is insidious in that when you kill it, kill in quotes, it has latent underground buds that spring into action when it senses that the rest of it has been injured. So oftentimes quackgrass, you'll have to spray it. You think it's dead, brown, it'll regrow, then hit it again. And so, not good solutions for getting quackgrass or tall fescue out of our lawn. Crabgrass, you can put crabgrass preventer on, and that gets applied in April. If you miss that and you've got little seedlings and it's crabgrass, there are crabgrass killers on the market, you'll see, called that crabgrass killer, and that has to be applied when those little tiny seedlings are still tiny. Once they get older, then it just doesn't have effect. So it's interesting. Again, it depends how much you want to invest in a lawn. On our boulevard, I can live with some quackgrass infiltrating it. It certainly does well for itself. So again, it kind of depends how much of a purist you want to be.
Right.
If you don't need a pure like a golf course, then it's okay to live with some of those.
If you're not putting
grasses
in your backyard, then maybe you're okay.
Exactly. I don't want quackgrass to invade our entire lawn because it doesn't look quite as nice. A little more coarse to walk on. But so at some point, if it does start infiltrating the rest, I might have to deal with that as well. Anything else on weed control that you're wondering about, John?
No, let's take a quick little break and we'll come back. Let's talk more about seeding.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back. And this week we're talking about lawn and lawn care. We're just talking about fertilizer. So let's talk about seeding. First of all, what comes first, fertilizing or seeding?
Well, that's interesting. They can go together because if you've got some spots to fill and seed in, the fertilizer companies have helped us out because they are, when you're shopping and looking at the fertilizer, there are fertilizers packaged for newly seeded lawns.
Okay.
So it's going to give some nutrition, but it'll be light enough that it's not going to burn the grass. Otherwise, if you use regular fertilizer and you're going to be seeding, it could burn the newly developed seeds. So shop for fertilizer called for newly seeded lawns. And I've gotten a lot of emails this spring here from lawns that don't look so great. And when I say don't look so great, that have bare patches. And it was a tough winter. We didn't have much snow, which kind of sounds good, but not really. So there was die out on things, including some lawns, and we had pretty cold temperatures. So some people's lawns were left with patchiness, dead patches. Now, if a little area is small, say less than 6 inches in diameter, the grass will usually fill in. Our Kentucky bluegrass has the amazing ability to grow sideways. it even tries to grow out over our sidewalk, which is why we have to edge it, because it'll kind of grow over that. So it will grow sideways well, and that's why fertilizing is important to encourage that. So less than 6 inches, those bare spots tend to be kind of a little bit matted. So to encourage the grass to fill in sideways, just with a good garden rake, scratch the bare spots a little bit. Okay. Less than 6 inches, it's going to fill in. If it's patches greater than 6 inches, then scratch them up, but probably reseed, overseed that area. And when choosing grass seed types for our area, look for one that has at least 50% Kentucky bluegrass cultivars. There may be different names of Kentucky bluegrass. Add those up. Look for one that has at least 50%. And this is where it pays to buy the good stuff. Okay. It's going to be more expensive, but the cheap bargain brands aren't going to give you as good a lawn. And a lawn can last 100 years easily. And so buy the good stuff. Invest in a good, high-quality grass seed, at least 50% Kentucky bluegrass. Little fescue added in, because if you've got some trees, shade trees, a little bit of shade, the fescues do better. So in these bare spots, scratch the surface good, seed, try to get a little bit of seed soil contact. You could even add a little bit of topsoil over that area, then seed. The grass seed, gently just rake it in. You should still be able to see some of the grass seed on the surface. That's kind of an unusual thing about grass. You don't actually plant it very deeply. And then be sure to keep those areas moist. A little bit of mulch helps. Could just be dried grass clippings over the surface, very lightly over the surface. Or you can buy those bags of mulch that's kind of like the highway mulch, when they do the hydro mulching with that green product that they spray on. You can buy bags, homeowner type bags of that. That gives a little bit of protection, keeps it more moist, because that surface needs to be kept dark moist until it germinates. So any areas like that, now is a perfect time. The soil's good and warm, so the grass seed will come up. Now, Kentucky bluegrass can take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate. So patience again. Some of the other grass types that are in that mix will probably germinate quicker. But, you need to keep it moist for a couple of weeks usually.
Yeah. When can you kind of dial back a little bit on the watering to keep it moist? Once it germinates?
As soon as you visibly see grass growing.
Okay.
Yeah, and when you look at it and you see green growing, then you can start dialing back. It doesn't need to be constantly moist like the germination period requires. But on a hot, windy day, then once a day or so, then if it's still tender and weak seedlings emerging, then on a hot, windy day, make sure you're giving it some extra watering.
So if you fertilized over around Memorial Day, how long should you wait before you overseed?
Yeah, what if you put on the full strength of fertilizer? How long should you wait? Moisture would have kind of gotten that fertilizer down in a little bit. So even if you did fertilize and now you realize I need to seed, and if you use the full strength fertilizer, I'd still go ahead and reseed. I think it's going to be okay. But if a person had your preference, it would have used the weaker fertilizer for seeding as well.
Okay.
Yeah, but I definitely go ahead and seed.
So you talked about bare spots. As somebody who's got dogs,
sure.
Dogs can do a number on a lawn too. So if you've got spots that are not bare, it's not exposed, but the grass is clearly killed. Is that something too, where should I rake it up to expose down to dirt, or should I just kind of rake it up to break it up, put down some seed, and then put a little top dressing over it?
Yeah, you can do kind of the no-till option.
Okay.
And rake it, get some of the dead grass kind of raked a little bit. You don't have to see entirely bare soil. Okay. But rake it such that it seems like the grass seed is going to be able to get down in a little bit. Okay. So give it a good raking, and it's kind of like no-till farming, I guess, where you don't actually need to see a lot of soil. You can seed into the stubble there. Okay. And of course, there's always chance that there's still, the ammonia and things from the urine there. So if a person tries to flush it with a hose first, just to make sure that is diluted down and out. and then you should be able to grow. It's interesting, dog spots. Have you ever noticed where I don't have a dog, so I've had to observe other people's lawns, but oftentimes around that dead spot will be a ring of very beautiful, lush, dark green grass. Have you ever noticed that?
I should
Okay. Because sometimes the urea, the ammonia fertilizer, it'll kill the one spot, but on the perimeter sometimes gives it some extra fertilizer. And so sometimes you'll see that darker ring right around, but you still have to deal with the dead spot.
We talked a little bit about top dressing, but for people who aren't familiar with that word, what exactly is that?
Yeah, when you read gardening books from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, and the suburban lawn really took off after World War II. The lawn, the clickety-click of the reel mower, the Leave It to Beaver houses with the nice lawns. And if a person reads books, gardening books from the 40s and 50s, they refer to top dressing. So top dressing is adding a nice soil, a topsoil. Maybe it's compost. Could be a well decomposed manure. Sometimes you'll encounter gardening books. Applied over the lawn, right over the growing lawn, but in a thin enough layer so it's not going to conceal the lawn grass, but a thin enough layer, I don't know, maybe we're talking about an inch or less of material distributed over the lawn, which after it's watered will settle down in. You can still see the grass blade coming through it. But what that does is it helps decompose any thatch. Thatch is kind of that undecomposed old lawn clippings and stuff. So top dressing with good topsoil or whatever will help decompose that thatch and kind of wakes up that lawn, gets the good microbes and everything going to stimulate good root growth. And so if a lawn was kind of thin, or maybe even if the lawn seemed kind of compacted, top dressing used to be more of a thing. I'm hearing more about that now again. So, that can kind of help thicken up a lawn, give it kind of a new breath of life also.
Now, when we were talking about seeding, we talked about Kentucky bluegrass. That's something that you want to see a good amount of in your grass. That grows well for us up here, right?
Exactly. Yep. That's
what other things should you be looking for on the bag or on the packaging?
Yes, Kentucky bluegrass, 50 or so percent. A little bit of fescue, might be creeping red fescue or other types of fescue. That's a good shade-tolerant grass. And then there will be probably a few, might have a little ryegrass or something. But in that blend, those are all grass seed types that mesh together well. It's like, okay, after everything germinates and you've got your lawn growing, you're not going to be able to see, oh, that's a bluegrass, unless you're a grass specialist, you're not going to be able to, there's some bluegrass and there's some fescue. It meshes and blends together to make a beautiful turf. And so that's why they do the blends, because in certain areas, for example, if it's dappled shade by a tree a part of the day, then the fescues will tend to kind of persist a little more in that area. And so just the blend of a grass is usually what makes a good lawn rather than a pure. You can buy pure 100% Kentucky bluegrass, but these blends kind of blend together to make a healthier lawn.
So any tips for when we are doing the seeding? What things, like I have one of those older rotary, it's got that kind of the dial on the bottom, so it spits it out.
Is that kind of the handheld
no,
one?
It's a rolling one.
Yeah. And the grass seed, and that's why I kind of like the name brand, the national name brands of grass seed, because they will usually indicate on the label enough detail that tells you what setting to put on whatever brand of spreader you've got. And that's why I also enjoy. I bought a number of years ago, I bought a national name brand of spreader, which can be used for both fertilizer and seeding. And the advantage of having a name brand spreader, when you buy name brand seed, it's going to tell you what setting to use. If you have some kind of way off brand spreader,
Right.
it may not tell you where to set it. And the settings do differ on those, I've noticed. And so the package will tell you what setting to put it on for seeding. The same thing with fertilizer. If you've got a name brand, and again, it doesn't always refer to only their name brand, but if it's at least a name brand, it'll tell you where to set it for fertilizer. You also, that brings to mind too, there are a couple of different types of spreaders. One is called a cyclone spreader that whirls the product out kind of in a cyclone.
Right.
The other is called a drop spreader, which drops it just down right under the spreader. I like the drop spreader because the cyclone spreader, when you're kind of next to your driveway, it can spread fertilizer and grass seed way out on the
or next to a flower bed.
Exactly, where you don't want this stuff. So the drop spreader is the one I prefer that drops it is just right under the spreader itself and isn't throwing it all over the place. So that's just what that's the type that I enjoy.
With you talked about having a spreader that can be used for fertilizer or grass seed. Certainly with fertilizer, you really have to be careful that you don't go over an area twice. Is that as much of an issue for grass seed?
No,
it's not really.
You're right about the fertilizer. Otherwise, you can cause yellow streaks from overburning. And grass seed, not so much. Yeah, you don't want to get it on any thicker than necessary. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to overlap the way it would hurt with fertilizer.
Let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about mowing.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back, and this week we're talking about lawns and lawn care. We talked about fertilizing. We talked about seeding. Let's talk about the other important step, mowing.
Mowing, yeah. Oh, and the smell of freshly mown grass in the spring. It's wonderful. I mentioned seemingly small things that we can do that over time create a healthy, self-sustaining lawn. And mowing is one of those. The recommended mowing height is about 3 inches at least. You could go a little higher, 3.5 inches. And what that does is that height allows a pretty good grass surface. I mean, the lawn still looks nice and crisp, but it allows a greater grass green surface. So the more grass green surface you have, the more photosynthesis that grass plant is doing, and then it in turn can spread sideways more, produces a deeper root. Whereas if you're mowing low and short, you're cutting off a lot of that photosynthesis surface, and so that grass plant can't do as much good stuff. It's going to be shallower rooted. It's not going to spread sideways as much because you're kind of preventing it from doing its thing. And so 3 inches, 3.5 inches are the recommended, and they've done a lot of research on that. And so how do you know the height? Sometimes your mower, if you bought a new mower, we had to buy a new mower a couple of years ago, and it tells on the instruction manual, tells whereabouts to set it if you want that 3.5 inch. So I've set my wheels at that. If you don't have the manual yet, you can just, measure. Measure the kind of the height to where that blade is, or cut some, mow some, and then measure from the ground up to see how far you're actually cutting. So that mowing height is a very, very important. That mowing height really can, over time, cause the lawn to become much healthier. Also bagging, to bag or not bag. And we've talked about that a little bit. But really, allowing the clippings to filter down in is healthiest for the lawn. Now, if the lawn mowing gets away from you, and if the grass would lay like a hayfield, it would be better to either rake it off or bag that up. But most of the mowers now, or you can buy a mulching blade, chop up the grass fine enough and kind of send it down into the turf profile so that it doesn't lay on the surface. And so, well, there are good things to be had from those grass clippings, because when they're left down in the lawn, as they decompose into good humusy organic compost, they're feeding the lawn. Over the course of one summer, they contribute about one fertilizing. So if you decided never to fertilize the lawn, and out on the farmyard, they never fertilized the grass. But they also were not bagging the clipping. So they were self-feeding. The lawn was self-feeding itself by letting those clippings feed the lawn. Also, as the clippings decompose into kind of a good humusy compost, it's also keeping the roots cool. The grass will stay greener longer in summer if the roots stay cool. It also conserves moisture, so you don't have to be adding as much water. So you see, keeping that higher mowing height and letting the clippings filter down in, you're helping the lawn to become healthier and more self-sustaining. And also letting the clippings filter in has been shown to reduce weed pressure as well. So then you have less weed control. So you see, things such as that are helping us to have less work. Well, plus you don't have to bag them up and haul them to the compost collection site or haul them to the back of your yard in your own compost. And so you're saving time and resources there. So again, a simple thing we can do to create a healthier lawn over the long haul. So letting the clippings fall.
What about watering? That's another crucial aspect.
Yeah. And, it's important to know when we do opt to water, how much we're putting on. Now, if Mother Nature would give us 1 inch of rain per week, we wouldn't have to water our lawns. They'd stay green even during summertime. That'd be wonderful. Every 7 to 10 days, getting an inch of rain. But oftentimes that doesn't happen. So if we opt to water our lawns, it's much more efficient and effective to apply 1 inch in one application at one time. Okay, what that does is it puts on enough water so that it will penetrate down into the root system, and it encourages good, deep root system that can access subsoil moisture. If we apply frequent shallow sprinklings, it's going to stay more at the surface, and that's where the roots are going to grow. Lawn grass isn't stupid. It's not going to send deep down roots if all the water is up near the surface. It's going to make shallow roots. And so frequent light sprinklings are counter to what a lawn actually should have. And now, so how do you know how long to run a sprinkler if you do opt to water your lawn? How long do you have to run a sprinkler to apply an inch? Well, everybody's lawn sprinkler or sprinkler system is different.
Right.
And so I like the tuna can. The tuna can is a wonderful tool. Tuna can or other straight-sided can. Tuna can is about 1 inch deep. So that'll tell you, put a couple of tuna cans or soup can out under the sprinkler pattern in a few. And then you can kind of time, how long do I have to run my sprinkler or my sprinkling system to collect an inch? Now on light soils, very light sandy soils, maybe you should divide that inch into 2 waterings per week, a half an inch twice a week on the light soil like that. But overall then, and also anyone with a sprinkler system, sometimes it's set up just automatically. You don't always know how much water you're applying. And so put a tuna can out in a couple of places and see how much am I actually applying each time. So again, wise use of water and using the water in a way that will help the lawn to be deeper rooted and more healthy in the long run.
Are you seeing more grass alternatives, I should say, used for lawns?
Yes. And also a pure lawn that we obsessed to get anything that isn't a pure grass out is becoming a little bit a thing of the past. Because, for example, sometimes I refer back to the 40s and 50s because those people had good lawns too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Leave It to Beaver, they had a beautiful lawn, it looked like, although I think it was black and white, but it looked nice.
It was full.
Yeah, it was full. So anyway, when you read some of those books, an elite lawn had clover in it. And clover meshes well with the white Dutch clover, the low-growing, meshes well with lawns, and it also produces nitrogen, so it's kind of self-feeding the soil, and it plays well with our lawn grass, looks nice. And so whether it's incorporating clover into the lawn, see, the lawn seeds used to have clover in them, until we decided our lawns maybe should look like a putting green. But now the movement is to get some of these, back into the mix. And you can even do some searching on bee lawns, things that will mesh well with our lawn grass. Clover is usually added. Creeping time's a little borderline in hardiness. So sometimes you could try it in a lawn. There's another fascinating little flowering plant called self-heal. So when you're looking for a bee lawn mix, it'll oftentimes have those included in it. You can overseed, or a new area you can do that with. So there are some of these lawn alternatives kind of being brought in. Now you've been working on is it a clover?
Yeah, bee lawn.
Yeah. Now, did that have the mix of a few varieties in it?
Well, it was it's called one of the things is 23% celestial creeping red fescue. I'm just looking at a photo I have of the label. And about 23% of intrigue chewing fescue, and another little bit of gladiator hard fescue, blue mesa sheep fescue, and really only about 5% white Dutch clover, but then a little bit of creeping time and the self-heal.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And again, for having dogs, it gets a little bit of a workout. So I'm going to have to go over and overseed. But some of it's held up really pretty good. And once it gets going, it fills in really nicely. You can mow it, or you can keep it high if you want. But we do see more interest there from pollinators. It's good for that. So yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah, fascinating. And sometimes people opt to reduce the amount of lawn that they have, maybe put in some flower beds, some native type flower gardens. And so, there are other things that can be planted kind of for low growing lawn alternatives. For example, in an area you're not going to walk on, creeping juniper, the low-growing, spreading junipers,
really
you could plant those. They're pretty. Again, you can't really be walking on them. There are sedges is another kind of grass-like species that you don't mow.
Creeping Jenny's an interesting one.
Yes, or Creeping Charlie.
You can go Creeping Charlie.
Yes, there's some attractive lawns in Fargo that decided, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And so they let the Creeping Charlie grow, and it's certainly vigorous.
I can't remember the name of the guy who was on This Old House. He was their lawn and garden expert. Roger, I think, maybe. I can't remember. But he came to Fargo one time, and Prairie Public was putting it on. So Prairie Public invited me to go out and meet him and talk to him. And he was very kind of animated about Creeping Charlie.
Oh, yeah. What did he say about it?
He said, look, it's green. It's green. It's a ground cover. It's kind of pretty. I don't know why so many people have this hang up about getting rid of it. But, some people do. Some people don't want that. But, it is. It's vigorous. It can certainly take over a lawn. And if you just want something to cover it, you're not going to have really a lot of patches there.
Yeah, what I wish with Creeping Charlie, I wish it had the good sense to stop where you wanted it to stop.
It doesn't recognize borders.
It would be just awesome, if it didn't creep into your little landscape flower beds and stuff. But you got to hand it to Creeping Charlie. It does, it does persist. and it sends up a pretty little blue flower.
Mhm.
And so in the right location, I could see that being a lawn alternative.
Yeah.
Especially if you didn't have any neighbors close by
Right.
that might frown on it trying to become their lawn as well.
Yeah.
And so, we're in interesting times, and I'm happy. I think it's encouraging with a lawn, with lawns, that we're open to other things in our lawn. We're open to bringing more things in and kind of having a little wider acceptance in what we want in a lawn. That it doesn't have to be high input. It doesn't have to be a lot of chemicals.
Manicured grass.
Exactly. That we can do some things, and simple things, simple care type things that help the lawn to become more self-sustaining. Mow it at the 3-inch level. When you do water deeply. Let the clippings fall. And those simple things over time really help a lawn to to kind of self-perpetuate. Our lawn isn't high input. I fertilize it, but I mow high. We actually don't water it. That's why in the middle of summer sometimes it does go dormant, but that's okay. That's its own self-mechanism, preservation, and so it comes back. So we are in good times for lawn. I'm happy that we have a little wider look at what our lawns can be, should be, and how they can be wonderful.
All right. Well, this has been fun. It's been very, very informative. And if people have questions about their lawn, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. And thanks for all of you who write. And thanks for those of you who send some photos of successes as well as challenges.
All right. Well, Don, thanks again, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, and thanks everyone for listening.